What if the silence surrounding you is not emptiness but evidence, proof that the world has quietly stopped seeing you? What if the reason you feel transparent is not because you faded, but because society has trained its eyes to look elsewhere? There is a haunting paradox hidden in the late chapters of life. The more wisdom one accumulates, the more invisible one becomes. And yet, beneath that quiet disappearance, something ancient and unyielding still burns. The need to be witnessed, not merely remembered. They told you visibility was a privilege of the young, that purpose belonged to those still racing towards something. But Viktor Frankl warned us, man is not defined by what is left behind, but by the meaning he chooses even when the world has turned its back. The question is not whether time has erased your relevance. It hasn't. The question is why you started believing that it had. Perhaps invisibility is not an external condition at all, but a mirror held up to the surrender we swore we'd never make. And if that is true, then the power to be seen again was never lost, only hidden. Somewhere beyond the noise of indifference lies a revelation so unsettling, so transformative, that once you grasp it, you will never walk into a room and feel unseen again. But to uncover it, you must follow the thread of this story, each word a step deeper into the labyrinth of why so many elders vanish from society's gaze, and how some shatter that illusion entirely, miss even a single moment, and the key to reclaiming that lost visibility might slip forever back into the dark. There is a peculiar moment, often imperceptible, almost tender, when a person realizes that the world has stopped turning its gaze toward them. It does not happen suddenly, like a door slamming shut, but rather like a gradual dimming of the light, so subtle that by the time darkness fully settles in, it feels almost natural. You begin to speak and notice the words hang in the air, unanswered. You enter a room and feel the weight of glances sliding past you as though your presence were merely a shadow against the wall. And the cruelest part is not the invisibility itself. It is how easily you start to accept it as inevitable, as if fading were simply the tax life demands for the privilege of having lived. But is it? Or is this quiet erasure the most dangerous illusion of all? Perhaps what we call invisibility is not the absence of sight but the absence of meaning. Frankl taught that human beings can endure almost anything if they understand why, but the moment they lose their sense of purpose, they cease to exist in the eyes of others, and worse, in their own. What if the world's indifference is not a verdict, but a reflection of an inner surrender we never meant to give? What if the silence around you is not the world's forgetting, but your soul whispering that it has stopped trying to be heard? These questions do not accuse, they reveal. They force us to confront the uncomfortable truth that the fading often begins from within. Memory becomes both balm and blade. The moments when you were sought, needed, seen, they replay like fragments of a film you once starred in. But nostalgia, seductive and cruel, tempts you to measure your present worth against your past relevance. And every time you lose that comparison, invisibility tightens its grip. Yet even in this spiral of diminishing significance, something resists. It is the stubborn ember of dignity, the instinctive refusal to vanish completely. And that ember, if tended, is enough to start a fire again. But to rekindle it, you must first look where most refuse to, into the abyss of your own complicity. How many times have you silenced yourself before anyone else could? How often have you chosen invisibility as a shield? From rejection, from irrelevance, from the terror of discovering that your voice might no longer matter. The paradox is merciless. The more you protect yourself from being unseen, the deeper you disappear. And yet, the moment you dare to confront this contradiction, something extraordinary happens. Invisibility begins to crack. For beneath the layers of withdrawal and resignation lies a truth too radiant to remain hidden. You were never truly invisible. You were only waiting for a world that no longer knows how to look. And perhaps the question is not whether they will see you again, but whether you are willing to step into the light even if they don't. There is a kind of loneliness that words cannot name, not the solitude of being alone, but the ache of being unseen amidst the crowd. It is a loneliness that corrodes silently, making every interaction feel hollow, every mirror unfamiliar. And yet this pain carries a question buried within it. Who are you when no one is watching? The answer to that question determines whether invisibility is a sentence or a season. The human heart is wired for witness. From the first cry at birth to the final breath, we long for our existence to be acknowledged, to matter beyond ourselves. But when society celebrates youth as the sole measure of value, those who have walked furthest begin to disappear in plain sight. This is the betrayal at the core of modern life. We confuse speed with relevance, novelty with worth, and in doing so, we abandon the very souls who hold the maps to our deepest truths. And yet, does their fading reveal more about them or about us? Frankl believed that meaning is not given by others. It is claimed by the self. To wait for validation is to build your identity on shifting sand. And perhaps this is the pivotal turning point. To stop seeking to be seen and start living in a way that cannot be ignored. Visibility, after all, is not granted. It is radiated. It is the unspoken presence of a life burning so authentically that even the indifferent cannot look away. But this transformation demands a reckoning. It requires you to shed the false stories you've been told, that your best years are behind you, that your wisdom is outdated, that your presence is a relic. These are not truths. They are convenient narratives designed to keep the noise of the world comfortable. And you are not here to comfort the world. You are here to disturb it with the depth of your being, to unsettle it with the weight of your experience, to remind it that time is not a thief, but a sculptor. The question then is no longer how can I be seen, but what version of myself am I willing to reveal? Because when you stand unapologetically in the fullness of who you have become, invisibility becomes impossible, not because they suddenly start looking, but because you begin to shine in a way that refuses to be ignored. There is a strange liberation in realizing that invisibility, once feared, can become a stage for reinvention. When no one expects anything from you, the possibilities expand. You are free to create, to speak, to live without the weight of eyes that judge or measure. But liberation without direction becomes emptiness, and emptiness is fertile soil for despair. The challenge, then, is to transform invisibility from a void into a vantage point. In the absence of external recognition, you are forced to confront the raw essence of your existence. What remains when titles, roles, and expectations are stripped away? The answer is not always comforting. It is in this darkness that many retreat, but those who do not, who instead embrace the discomfort, discover something profound. They find that their worth was never meant to be reflected in others' eyes. It was meant to radiate from within. Frankl often spoke of the human capacity to choose one's attitude, even in the face of suffering. It is this choice, quiet, invisible, but immeasurably powerful, that transforms invisibility into influence. When you act from meaning rather than validation, your presence ceases to be dependent on attention. You become a force that shapes the world not by demanding to be seen, but by daring to exist fully even when unseen. But this choice is not without its trials. The ego will rebel, clinging to the old metrics of worth. The past will whisper, tempting you with the comfort of who you once were, and doubt will creep in, questioning whether reinvention is even possible. Yet each of these inner battles is a doorway. Pass through them, and you will find not a lesser version of yourself, but a truer one unshackled from the gaze of others. And perhaps in this state of authentic being, something unexpected occurs. The world begins to notice again, not because you begged for attention, but because you became undeniable. This is the paradox at the heart of meaning. The less you seek visibility, the more visible you become. Still, we must confront the shadows that linger, the memories of conversations where your voice was talked over, the gatherings where your presence was politely ignored, the moments when even those you love most seem to look through you. These wounds are not trivial. They etch deep grooves in the psyche, shaping the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. And unless brought into the light, these stories will keep us small, quiet, unseen. But healing does not mean erasing the pain. It means rewriting the narrative around it. It means recognizing that each dismissal was not evidence of your insignificance, but a reflection of others' blindness. It means reclaiming the chapters where you allowed silence to speak louder than your truth. And it means forgiving yourself, not for disappearing, but for believing that you had no other choice. Frankl's wisdom whispers here, suffering, when met with purpose, ceases to be suffering. Your invisibility, too, can become sacred, a crucible in which resilience, depth, and clarity are forged. Every moment you felt unseen was perhaps a preparation for a deeper kind of visibility, one not measured in glances, but in impact. The question is whether you will let that suffering define you or refine you. And in this refining, a new kind of courage emerges. The courage to speak even when no one is listening. The courage to stand tall even when no one is watching. The courage to keep showing up for life itself, not for applause but for meaning. It is a quiet, unwavering courage, and it is stronger than any crowd's approval. This is where invisibility loses its power. For when your worth is no longer tethered to the world's recognition, you become untouchable. You walk through rooms not as someone hoping to be noticed, but as someone who knows that their presence is, in itself, an act of defiance against erasure. And so, the journey bends toward a final revelation, not of how to be seen by others, but of how to truly see yourself. Because visibility in its deepest sense is not about being observed. It is about being known, intimately and unapologetically, by the one person whose gaze matters most. It is about meeting your own reflection and not looking away. To reclaim visibility is to reclaim authorship of your story. It is to decide, consciously and fiercely, that the narrative of your life will not be written by cultural biases, by shrinking expectations, or by the silence of others. It is to rise each day as if your existence were a message, one that the world desperately needs, even if it doesn't yet know how to read it. Frankl believed that meaning is discovered not in grand gestures, but in the quiet choice to live as though every moment matters. And perhaps that is the ultimate act of visibility, to live so deeply aligned with your purpose that your very being becomes a statement, not a plea to be seen, but a declaration that you are, fully, fiercely, irrevocably. And when you live from this place, the world shifts. The same eyes that once glanced past you begin to linger. The same society that once dismissed you begins to listen. And the same silence that once stifled you becomes the space into which your voice now echoes. Visibility ceases to be something you chase. It becomes something you embody. But even now, the final question remains, pulsing quietly beneath the surface. If invisibility was never truly imposed upon you, but chosen, even unconsciously, then what else might you choose from this moment forward? And what might the world look like if, instead of waiting to be seen, you decided to illuminate it yourself? There is a moment, quiet and unassuming, when everything you have heard ceases to be theory and becomes a mirror. It is the moment when you realize that invisibility was never a cloak the world threw over you. It was a veil you learned to wear, and just as it was chosen, it can be removed, not torn away in anger, but lifted gently, like morning light dissolving the darkness. The truth has always been simple and terrifying. To be seen is not to be noticed. It is to exist so fully that the world has no choice but to adjust its gaze. And in this realization something begins to stir, a pulse, a whisper, a new beginning disguised as remembrance. Perhaps the purpose of being unseen was never punishment, but preparation. Perhaps it was the silence you needed to hear the sound of your own becoming. The world does not decide when your story is over. Only you do. And if there is breath in your lungs, there is still a chapter unwritten, still a sentence trembling to be spoken. Like roots breaking through stone, visibility is not granted. It is claimed patiently, defiantly, with every act of meaning you choose to embody. And when you do, the past no longer defines you. It refines you into something vast enough to hold all that you were, all that you are, and all that you are still becoming. Do not wait for the world to call your name. Speak it into existence yourself. Do not hope to be seen. See yourself first, and let that truth radiate outward until it becomes impossible to ignore. Let the weight of every dismissal, every overlooked gesture, every quiet ache, become the gravity that anchors you deeper into purpose. Because the paradox is this: the moment you stop seeking permission to exist is the moment the universe begins to conspire in your favor. And from that stillness, the echo of your presence begins to ripple beyond the limits of what you once thought possible. So now the question lingers, not will they see me, but what will I do with this new light? If this journey has awakened even the faintest spark inside you, let it become action. Share this message not as content, but as a call to every soul who has ever felt invisible, to every heart that has ever whispered, I am still here. Like, comment, subscribe, and become part of a movement that refuses to disappear. Because being seen is not a privilege reserved for the few, it is a birthright reclaimed by the brave, and the world is waiting, even if it does not yet know it, for you to step forward and be seen again.